Welcome to Brewed, a dive into Wisconsin's drinking culture, where we uncork the history, stories, and experiences that make Wisconsin the heartland of drinking culture in America. Today we take a journey as we delve into the rich history of Wisconsin's drinking culture, from its immigrant beginnings to its modern-day craft brewing renaissance. We'll explore how alcohol has woven itself into the fabric of Wisconsin's identity. But that's not all. We have two special guests joining us on the show today. First, we'll sit down with Dean Radis, the proud owner of Studs, a beloved local sports bar with over a decade of history. Dean will give us a pub owner's perspective on what it takes to run a successful pub in Wisconsin, while also embracing the tavern culture. And later, we'll hear from Richard Renz, a retired police chief who has seen it all when it comes to alcohol-related incidents. With his wealth of experience and unique insights, Richard will provide a sobering look at the impact of drinking on Wisconsin's communities and share some of the most memorable moments from his time on the force. So grab a drink, settle in, and join us as we raise a toast to the past, present, and future of Wisconsin's drinking culture. You're watching Brewed.
The history of drinking culture in Wisconsin is as rich and diverse as the state itself, dating back to its early European settlement in the 19th century. The foundation of Wisconsin's drinking culture can be traced back to its immigrant roots, particularly those of German and Polish descent. These settlers brought with them a strong tradition of brewing and distilling, laying the groundwork for the state's vibrant beer and spirits industry. By the mid-19th century, breweries began to spring up across Wisconsin, capitalizing on the fertile lands and the abundant natural resources. Taverns and saloons played a central role in Wisconsin's social life, serving as community hubs where locals gathered to socialize, discuss politics, and unwind after a long day's work. Then there's the Prohibition era. The temperance movement of the early 20th century culminated in the nationwide prohibition of alcohol in the 1920s. While this period brought about the closure of many breweries and taverns, Wisconsinites found a creative way to skirt the law. From underground speakeasies to bootlegging operations, Prohibition ultimately failed to curb the state's appetite for alcohol. From humble taverns to world-class breweries, the story of Wisconsin's drinking culture is one of resilience, creativity, and celebration. Now let's quit the history talk and get the story of a pub owner. Dean Radis, the owner of Studs Pub. Let's talk to him and get his first-hand experience with business and how he has run a successful pub for so long.
My dad started back in 1956. He started on 5th and Wells downtown, and it was my grandfather's place back in the 30s. He had that store. When my dad took it over in 1956, he didn't want to stay downtown, moved to 60th and North Avenue in Wauwatosa, and there again, that he saw potential in that, being on a busy street, North Avenue, on the corner. And all the guy did there was sit behind the counter. And my dad was a hard worker, very hard worker, and so was my mother. And they instilled that in me. And my mom and dad worked that store themselves 6, 7 days a week. And me and my brother Greg, we hated it because we not only went to school during the week, but my mom and dad worked it themselves. And they couldn't afford anybody, and we didn't really have any family around to take care of us. So we had to go down to the store all the time on Saturdays or Sundays, and that's just the way it was. Great, I was 10, 11, 12 years old, and my mom and dad were taking me down to the store, and I'd sort out the soda bottles. At that time, you had to return the bottles. Loading up the beer cooler, filling up the candy rack, filling up the liquor shelves, the wines, and all that stuff. And that continued on and on and on until I was 18 years old. Now my dad was one of those guys, he said, you know, you've been working here, but I want you to go work for somebody else. So at 18, 19 years old, I went to work at United Wine and Spirits for $4.25 an hour. And I loaded up the trucks and I set up the orders and I swept the warehouse. And after that, Edison Liquor wanted me to work there. So I started working for Edison Liquor. And that was a big jump. I started out at $6.50 an hour. So I did that for a few years and then went back and worked for my dad. Yeah, where I did that for 33 years. Like I said, I always wanted to open up a sports bar. I wanted to see if I could be successful at it. You got to make your own path in life and keep moving forward. And I'm a guy, I love change. So at 51 years old, I started Stud's Pub. So I said, you know what, screw it. I'm gonna try it. If I'm successful, great. And if I'm not successful, that would have been fine too, because I would have gone on to something else. But at least I could say I tried it. But I'll never forget one day my dad turned to me and said, Dean, he was sitting at the bar, and he said, Dean, he said, you made the right choice. If I can say I have been successful, but it's just my game plan. It's what I set out to do is keep it simple as possible. Sometimes that's tough to do. But when I first opened up the doors, I knew first thing I was gonna do. I opened up the doors, I walked down the bar, and I introduced myself to everybody. What it did and what it created was a place where people could come and everybody knows your name, what they say. You're looking at a place that everybody has become friends in one way or another. And that's what it's all about. I never consider them customers. I consider them friends and family and people that I really respect and enjoy seeing every day. People in Wisconsin, they like their they like their beer, they like their drinking, they like to have fun. Even our older people, they don't want to stay home. I mean, you want to stay home, and unless it's a tornado or or we're under 2 feet of snow, they're going to come out. In all the years I've been here, we've only had to call West Dallas, our West Dallas Police Department, which does a great job, maybe a handful of times, and it's something that we are very fortunate that the West Dallas substation is right across the street. So I think that keeps down the amount of problems. The safety of your, like I say, not customers, like a Stud's family, is the most important, although we can't catch everything. We've had some people fall down. I mean, let's call an apple, an orange, an orange. We're not perfect, and we're not on top of the game all the time. Somebody needs an Uber or a Lyft or a cab, we're there, we're gonna call right away. The Tavern League has put together a good program, and they put together the Share Ride program, where you can call up, no charge, and they'll take a person home. After being in the business for so long, I don't want to say I don't, and I don't want to say that I had to, but I hardly drink anymore. It's been about 20 years. And I don't miss it at all. I just kind of lost my taste for it. You won't see me drinking. I'm always staying busy. I'm always, I'll do anything that my employees do or that I ask my employees to do. You're only as good as the people you put around you. And I've got the greatest respect for my employees, no question about it. But if I had to tell somebody going in the bar business, don't drink. You got to treat it as a business. Sure, you're going to have fun once in a while, but you can't treat it like a party all the time. And there's no substitute for hard work. None. Zero. Don't be your own worst enemy. I mean, you can make money in this business. You can have fun in this business. But you got to work hard, and you got to treat it like a business. The one most important thing you got to have whatever you're doing is the hard work ethic, but also, especially in a business like this, you got to have common sense. Yeah, if I could do it again, I definitely would, because I enjoy it. I am a people person, but I love people. I don't care if you're 20 years old. I got some 90-year-olds that come in here, and I enjoy their company. And I love to talk to them, and I'm always looking for knowledge, or I ask them questions. I'm always very curious, and that's what I am. I don't like Florida. I don't like the beach. I can't lay out by the ocean or the pool, or I don't fish. I don't hunt. I only read the financial section and the sports section. I hate yard work. I can't pound a nail in a 2x4. So what am I gonna do? The only thing I like is I like to golf, and I like to go to the casino. That's what I like to do. So what am I gonna do? And I gotta have a purpose. I'm not a guy that sits at home. I can't sit in a chair. I can't watch. I don't watch TV until 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. And that's it. I gotta keep going. So I don't know what the big guys got planned for me up there, but I'm gonna keep going. That's it.
Now let's hear from a completely different point of view. This is Richard Renz, a retired police chief that worked in law enforcement for over 30 years. Richard tells us his experiences with being in the force and with alcohol-related incidents.
I started in police work in January of 1985, and I retired in April of 2021. So it was a total of 36 years. 6 years were at UW Milwaukee Police, and then in 1991 I came out and began working for Muskego Police Department. I actually became a police officer when I was 20 years old, and I did police work for 36 years. I think almost everybody that gets involved in police work does so because they want to help others, and that's the goal. They want to help and give back type thing. So that's where I was at the time, and I went through 2 years of training to get my associate degree. And then in January of 1985, I started working for the UW Milwaukee Police Department, and I worked there for 6 years. And then in April of '91, I came out to Muskego PD, and I worked there for 30 years, and then I retired in 2021. I went up through the ranks. I was patrolman, and I became a sergeant, and I became a lieutenant, captain, and then chief. So there seems to be a lot more alcohol use in Wisconsin than in most other states, and I'm not really sure why that is, if it's because we got a lot of breweries in the state or what, but there's also what seems to be this culture of drinking, and maybe not necessarily drinking, but there's a lot higher use of alcohol and the number of drinks than in a lot of the other states. So I don't really know what has fostered that, but it obviously impacts our society. Right, people can go and have a drink and it's not going to affect their decision making. But when they've had 5 or 6 drinks, then their decision making begins to be hampered by the alcohol. Alcohol, like I said before, they don't always make the best decisions when they're under the influence of alcohol, and then when people make poor decisions, the police get called. Yeah, it would include a self-awareness. How much have I had to drink? Do I feel like I'm able to drive or not? The other thing that people have to be careful of is that when you drink frequently and as you drink more, you build up a tolerance. So you feel okay because you get used to operating under that point of intoxication. As a patrol officer in Muskego, there were, alcohol-related driving offenses were very common, and we were actually very strict and aggressive in enforcement. I always figured one of my goals would be to get them off the road before they cause the accident. And a lot of times when you would make the arrest, a lot of times people would say, "Oh, I must be in Muskego," because we were known for enforcement of OWI laws. I would much rather arrest you here than take your accident report down the road. We actually had a fair number of accidents that involved alcohol, but not too many resulted in death. Yeah, we would have situations where we would get called where somebody, they have a problem with alcohol and they would literally drink themselves into unconsciousness or something like that, and we would have to commit them for an alcohol commitment so that they could hopefully get help for it. An alcohol commitment is when you drink to the point where you're incapacitated that you can't take care of yourself. And then if we got called to those, then we would intervene and we would commit them to the hospital, and they would take them and sober them up, and they'd try to get them into a program and stuff like that to get help. We went on a fair number of domestic disturbances, and that just because we went on them doesn't mean that somebody was arrested. But of all the domestic disturbances that I went on, I can only recall 2 of them where alcohol wasn't involved. It was very much a part of most domestic incidents. I would literally tell them, do not try to settle it tonight. So, if we got called and there was not going to be an arrest, we would tell them, go to different parts of the house, sleep it off, look into it and discuss it tomorrow, because when they've been drinking, there's no way they're going to be able to settle it in that situation. Back in '91, OWI was a lot more prevalent back then, leaving. Although now, when I was getting toward the end of my career, operating while under the influence of drugs was becoming more common. What happened over the years was they started to increase the penalties, and when they started to do that, then that became somewhat more of a deterrent, and I believe that is probably why the OWI things went down in that. And now, with Uber and Lyft and stuff, there's really no reason that if anybody's been drinking that they should be getting behind the wheel. Typically, you would stop them, and you'd have to have probable cause to stop them. It was usually erratic driving or something like that, and then you would run them through their field sobriety tests. And then if they didn't pass those and you had your probable cause, then you would arrest them. The dangers of alcohol, seen a lot of families that have been destroyed by it, and nobody sets out, to develop an alcohol problem. Everybody thinks it's not going to happen to me. It's like anything, it can get out of control, and it is very damaging to families, and obviously in police work, we dealt with that. One of the things that an OWI forwarded to somebody is that they were required to go through a program. Kinds of commitments that we regularly dealt with in law enforcement. There was the alcohol commitment, that's the person that became incapacitated due to alcohol. And then there was also the emergency commitment, that is a person who has become suicidal. And then we would commit them as well too to get them help. And in both of those situations, the first one obviously alcohol was involved, but usually in an emergency commitment where somebody would become suicidal, it was rare that alcohol was not involved with those as well. So I guess the advice that I would give to people who are going to go out and drink is to watch their intake. It regularly seen when dealing with people that were under the influence, every time that we would stop them, they would admit to 2 drinks. Everybody would say two beers. So apparently only the first one and the last one were counted. Although the rest of them in between, they didn't count. So, but it's very easy for you to lose track and to just continue to drink, and a lot of people don't realize, because it happens gradually, they don't realize that they are under the influence. They think they're fine, and then they'll get behind the wheel and drive. So my other recommendation would be is if you have any doubt on whether you should be driving, call for a ride. It is not worth the risk.
Hello, everyone. As you enjoy time with your friends or unwind after a long day, it's important to keep safety in mind when it comes to drinking alcohol. Firstly, knowing your limits. Understanding how much alcohol you can handle and pacing yourself is crucial to staying safe.
You read this for me? What does that say?
Man, you shouldn't be drinking anymore, man.
Why not?
I'm gonna take this away from you, okay?
That's my
Do
drink,
better.
man.
Secondly, staying hydrated is key. Remember to drink water or other non-alcoholic beverages in between alcoholic drinks to prevent dehydration.
Man, that took a lot out of me. Let's drink some water. Fresh. No, thanks. I'll stick to water.
Eating a meal before or during drinking can also help slow down the absorption of alcohol.
Oh, man. You need to eat something, man.
What you got?
I got some cheese crackers.
Let me get some. Thank you.
Eat those.
I will.
Right now.
Look out for each other.
You should do.
If you notice someone who has had too much to drink, offer them some assistance in getting home safe.
You don't need these, man. What you need is water. Drink some water,
It's the
friend.
same thing, man.
Drink some water. This is how you stay safe drinking.
Remember, never drink and drive.
As our journey comes to an end, here's to the past, present, and the future of Wisconsin's drinking culture. May it continue to inspire, unite, and enrich the lives of all who call this great state home. You've been watching Brewed, a dive into Wisconsin's drinking culture. Cheers.